This is Nicholas Shade, broadcasting live on 98.7 FM, out of Chicago. It's early morning, though time has started to feel less precise over the last few days. The markets open in less than an hour, and I'm sitting here with 3 monitors glowing in front of me, watching numbers move in ways I haven't seen in my entire career. I've spent 22 years analyzing financial systems, studying cycles, crashes, recoveries. There's always a pattern. There's always a warning. And there's always a delay between when something breaks and when people realize it. That delay is where we are right now. If you're just tuning in, let me try to ground this as clearly as I can. Over the past 6 months, we've been seeing increasing pressure on the global reserve currency. Treasury yields have been climbing in ways that didn't match economic growth. Foreign demand has been quietly declining. Central banks, especially overseas, have been reducing exposure slowly at first, then all at once. It didn't make headlines at first. It never does. But the bond market, it always knows first. 2 weeks ago, something shifted. Liquidity began to dry up in overnight lending markets. Banks stopped trusting each other enough to lend freely, even for short-term funding. That's not normal. That's the financial system holding its breath. And then came last Thursday. I remember the moment clearly because I was on air when the first alert came in. A major sovereign wealth fund, one of the largest in the world, started dumping U.S. government bonds in massive volume. Not gradually, not strategically, rapid liquidation. At first, analysts said it was a rebalancing move, but then others followed. Within hours, yields spiked so aggressively that circuit breakers had to be triggered. Not in the stock market, but in the bond market. That almost never happens. When confidence in government debt starts to crack, that's when the foundation itself begins to shift. Friday morning, the stock market reacted. I'm looking at the chart right now. The opening bell rang, and within minutes, the Dow dropped over 1,200 points. The S&P followed. Tech stocks, especially those tied to financial infrastructure, were hit the hardest. People called it a correction. They always call it that. But corrections don't come with this kind of volume. By midday, I started receiving messages from contacts inside major banks. Quiet messages, careful wording, the kind of language professionals use when they don't want to cause panic but can't ignore reality. Funding stress increasing. Unusual withdrawal activity. Internal discussions ongoing. That was Friday. Over the weekend, something else began to happen. Search trends spiked. Not for stocks. Not for investment advice. For cash. People started asking where to withdraw it. How much they could take out. Whether banks could run out. That question is usually theoretical. It isn't anymore. This morning, before coming into the studio, I stopped by a local branch of a national bank. Won't name it, but you'd recognize it instantly. The parking lot was fuller than I've ever seen it at that hour. The doors weren't even open yet, and there was already a line. Not chaotic, not panicked, just quiet. People standing with that same look. The one you see when something doesn't feel right, but no one wants to say it out loud. I stayed in my car for a few minutes just watching. A man in a suit, checking his phone every few seconds. A woman holding a folder, documents probably. An older couple sitting on a bench, speaking in low voices. No shouting, no urgency, just awareness. That's how it starts. Right now, the official messaging is calm. The Federal Reserve released a statement late last night assuring markets that liquidity facilities are fully operational and that the banking system remains resilient. Those words are carefully chosen. Resilient doesn't mean stable. Operational doesn't mean sufficient. What they're really saying is, the system is under stress but still functioning. For now, I'm watching pre-market indicators as we speak. Futures are down again. Not as sharply as Friday, but enough to signal continued fear. Financial sector stocks are leading the decline. That's important. When banks fall first, it's not just about share prices. It's about confidence. And confidence is the only thing holding a currency together. Let me explain that in the simplest terms I can. Money isn't valuable because it's printed on special paper or stored in secure servers. It's valuable because we all agree it is. We trust it. We trust that when we go to a store, it will be accepted. We trust that when we deposit it in a bank, it will still be there tomorrow. We trust that when we work for it, it will hold its value long enough to matter. The moment that trust starts to weaken, everything begins to shift. Not all at once. First, it's subtle. People withdraw a little more cash than usual. They delay large purchases. They watch the news more closely. They start asking questions they never asked before. And then, the system starts to feel it. Banks don't keep all deposits on hand. They can't. The system is built on lending, on the assumption that not everyone will ask for their money at the same time. But what happens when they do? We're not there yet, but we're closer than we've been in decades. I just received an update from one of the financial terminals. A regional bank, mid-sized, not one of the giants, has announced temporary adjustments to withdrawal limits. They're framing it as a precaution due to unusual transaction volumes. That language matters. Temporary, precaution, unusual. They're trying to slow the flow without triggering panic. But here's the reality. Once limits are introduced, people notice. And when people notice, they react. I'm getting messages now from listeners. Reports of longer lines at ATMs. Some machines already out of cash in certain neighborhoods. Again, not widespread. Not yet. But it's happening. And once it starts, it spreads faster than any official response can contain. The market opens in 30 minutes. I'll be here with you watching it unfold in real time. But before we get there, I want to say something clearly. This isn't a collapse. Not yet. This is the beginning of a shift. A fracture in confidence. And fractures have a way of growing. I can feel it in the data. I can see it in the behavior. And more than anything, I can hear it in the silence between people. Stay with me. We're going to keep tracking this as it develops. The opening bell rang 12 minutes ago, and I've been watching the screens without blinking. It didn't crash immediately. That's what made it worse. There was a brief moment, just a few seconds, where it looked almost stable. A small dip, a hesitation, like the market was deciding which direction to fall. And then it broke. Not gradually, not in waves. It dropped like something had been cut loose. Financial stocks led the fall again. Major banks, names people have trusted for generations, were down 8% within the first 5 minutes. Then 12%. Then trading halts began triggering across multiple exchanges. When circuit breakers activate this early, it means the system isn't absorbing the shock. It's rejecting it. Volume is enormous. That's the part that matters most. This isn't algorithmic noise or speculative panic. This is capital leaving. Institutional capital. The kind that doesn't move unless something deeper is wrong. I'm tracking capital flows, and there's a clear pattern forming. Money is not rotating into safer equities or even bonds. It's moving into commodities. Gold is up sharply. Silver even more. Oil is climbing despite weakening demand forecasts. That tells me something critical. Investors aren't looking for returns anymore. They're looking for survival. About 20 minutes ago, another alert came through, this time from one of the largest payment processing networks in the country. They're experiencing intermittent service disruptions. That's the official wording. What it means in reality is that transactions are failing. Cards are being declined, not because accounts are empty, but because the system itself is under strain. That's a different kind of failure. I've just checked social feeds and internal reports. People are posting videos from grocery stores. Lines stretching through aisles. Carts overflowing with essentials. Bottled water, canned food, dry goods. No one is screaming. No one is fighting. But the speed at which shelves are emptying tells me everything. This isn't fear. It's realization. I stepped outside the studio briefly during a break, just to see the streets. Traffic is heavier than usual for this time of day. Not gridlocked, but purposeful. People aren't commuting the way they normally would. They're moving with intent. stopping at banks, stopping at gas stations, stopping at anywhere that still accepts a card or cash. Gas stations are starting to show the first signs. Prices haven't officially updated across all locations yet, but I saw one station on the corner raise their price by nearly $1 per gallon within the span of an hour. That's not policy. That's reaction. When supply becomes uncertain, price becomes fluid. And right now, nothing feels certain. I'm getting confirmation from multiple sources now. Several regional banks have followed the first one. Withdrawal limits, different amounts, different wording, but the same underlying message. Slow it down, contain it, hope it stabilizes. But here's the problem. Banking isn't just about money. It's about belief. The moment people think they might not be able to access their funds, they all try at once. And no system can handle that. ATM networks are beginning to show real strain. Reports coming in from multiple states. Machines empty by mid-morning. Not isolated anymore. Clusters. Urban areas first. Suburbs following. Rural locations still holding. But that won't last long once the flow spreads. I just received a message from someone working inside a large commercial bank. Someone I've trusted for years. He didn't use alarmist language. He never does. But this is what he wrote. Internal liquidity stress escalating. Emergency meetings ongoing. We are not prepared if withdrawals continue at this rate. That sentence. That's the one that stays with me. We are not prepared. Markets are still falling. Another halt just triggered. The Dow is down over 2,800 points now. This isn't a correction anymore. This is a breakdown. And yet, official channels are still calm. Government spokespeople are urging patience. They're saying the system is strong, that this is a temporary market overreaction. I've heard those words before. In 2008, they said the same thing. The difference now is scale. Back then, it was the housing market. Now, it's the currency itself being questioned. I'm watching the foreign exchange markets. The dollar is weakening rapidly against multiple currencies, but not in a typical pattern. Usually, when one falls, another rises. Right now, everything feels unstable. It's as if no one knows where to move. That's dangerous, because when there's no clear safe place, people default to what they can hold. Physical assets, tangible goods, things they can see and touch. And that's exactly what's happening. I'm getting more reports from stores now. Some are starting to limit purchases. 2 cases of water per customer. 5 cans of food. Basic rationing. Not because they were told to, because they're trying to slow the shelves from going empty. But it's already happening. I've got an image here, sent just minutes ago. An entire aisle completely cleared. Not damaged, not looted, just empty. That quiet emptiness is more unsettling than any chaos, because it means people are acting rationally, and rational behavior can still lead to collapse when the system itself is fragile. I tried using my own card earlier, just to test it. It worked once, then it didn't. Same account, same store, different outcome within minutes. That inconsistency, that unpredictability, that's when trust begins to erode. Not in a dramatic moment, but in small, repeated failures. The kind that make people stop relying on the system altogether. We're approaching midday now, and I can feel it shifting. Not just in the numbers, but in the tone of the messages I'm receiving. People aren't asking if something is wrong anymore. They're asking how bad it's going to get. That question doesn't have a simple answer. But I can tell you this. The system is still functioning. Barely. Banks are still open. Transactions are still going through. Sometimes, markets are still trading. But everything feels strained, pulled tight, like something under pressure that hasn't snapped yet, but is getting closer with every passing hour. I'll stay with this. Keep watching. Keep reporting. Because right now, information might be the only stable thing left. It's late afternoon now, and the market has just closed. I've seen bad days before. Days where numbers fall fast enough to make even seasoned traders step back from their screens. This was different. There was no recovery attempt, no late-day rally, no sign of confidence stepping in to stabilize anything. It just kept falling until the bell forced it to stop. The final numbers are still coming in, but the scale is undeniable. Entire sectors wiped down double digits. Financial institutions hit hardest again. Some of the largest banks in the country lost over a quarter of their market value in a single trading session. That doesn't happen in a functioning system. That happens when trust is being repriced in real time. I've been watching post-market activity, and it's even worse. Selling hasn't stopped. It's just moved somewhere less visible. And that's always more dangerous, because it means the panic isn't contained to public trading hours anymore. It's continuous, relentless. I tried to step away for a few minutes after the close, just to clear my head. I walked outside the station again. Same street I've stood on thousands of times before. It doesn't feel the same. There's a tension in the air now. Not loud, not chaotic, but present. People are moving faster. Conversations are shorter. Phones are constantly in hand. I passed by a small grocery store 2 blocks down. Half the shelves were already empty. Not just essentials anymore. Everything. Snacks, frozen food, cleaning supplies, anything that could be used, stored, or traded. The cashier looked exhausted. Not physically, mentally, like someone who has been answering the same question over and over again all day. Do you have more in the back? And the answer is always no. Gas stations are worse now. Prices are changing so frequently that some locations have stopped updating their signs altogether. They're adjusting prices at the pump instead. I saw one man standing next to his car, just staring at the number as it climbed while he filled his tank. He didn't stop pumping. He just kept watching, because at some point, stopping doesn't make sense anymore. You pay whatever it is, because you don't know what it will be tomorrow. That's how inflation begins to feel, not as a statistic, but as a realization. Inside the studio, things haven't slowed down. If anything, the flow of information has accelerated. More banks have joined the list. Withdrawal limits are no longer isolated. They're spreading. National banks are still holding off publicly, but internally the discussions are happening. I know that from multiple sources now. They're watching the outflows, and those outflows are accelerating. People aren't just withdrawing cash anymore. They're closing accounts, moving funds, trying to get ahead of something they can't fully define yet, but can feel coming. ATM networks are starting to fail in waves. Not just empty machines, system errors, transaction timeouts, cards being rejected even when funds are available. That kind of failure spreads faster than any official announcement ever could, because people don't trust statements. They trust experience. And right now, their experience is telling them something is wrong. I've been tracking reports from across the country. Major cities are seeing the worst of it first. Long lines outside banks now extending around entire blocks. Not just in the morning. All day. People waiting hours to access their own money. Some leaving with less than they expected. Some leaving with nothing at all. And each one of those people goes home and tells someone else. That's how pressure multiplies. Not through headlines, but through conversations. I've received confirmation that at least 2 banks have temporarily closed certain branches early today. Officially, it's due to high demand and operational strain. Unofficially, it's because they don't have enough liquidity on hand to meet the pace of withdrawals. That's the part they won't say, but it's the part that matters most. I'm watching international markets now as they react. Asia opened a few hours ago, and the reaction is immediate. Sharp declines, currency volatility increasing. Global markets are no longer treating this as a localized issue. They're pricing in something bigger, because if confidence in one major currency begins to break, it doesn't stay contained. Everything is connected. Trade, debt, reserves. And right now, those connections are starting to strain. I tried making a small online purchase earlier. Nothing unusual, just a test. The payment didn't go through. Tried again. Failed. Different card. Same result. Eventually, the site itself stopped processing transactions entirely. Displayed a message I've never seen before. Payment services temporarily unavailable. That's new. And it's spreading. More platforms are reporting issues now. Not just banks. Payment processors. Retail systems. Even some payroll services are experiencing delays. When money can't move digitally, the system slows down in ways people aren't prepared for. Because we've built everything on the assumption that it always will. I've been getting more messages from listeners. The tone has changed again. There's urgency now. People asking if they should withdraw everything. If they should buy supplies. If they should prepare for something worse. I wish I could give a simple answer. But the truth is, we're already in it. This isn't a future event. This is happening. Right now. The question isn't whether the system is under stress anymore. It's how long it can hold under that stress. And every indicator I'm watching suggests that time is running out faster than anyone expected. Night is starting to fall outside, but the activity hasn't slowed. If anything, it's intensifying, because people are realizing something important. Tomorrow isn't guaranteed to look like today, and when that realization sets in, behavior changes. Fast. I'll stay on this as long as I can. Keep tracking. Keep reporting. Because whatever comes next, we're gonna face it together in real time. It's the second day since the first withdrawal limits were announced. I didn't sleep. Not really. I stayed here in the studio most of the night, watching overseas markets collapse in sequence like falling dominoes. Asia dropped first. Then Europe opened, and followed immediately. No hesitation this time. No attempt to stabilize. Just recognition. By the time their trading day was halfway through, it was clear this wasn't contained anymore. This wasn't a domestic issue. This was global. Currencies are moving in ways that don't make sense under normal conditions. Not strengthening. Not stabilizing. Just shifting erratically. As if no one trusts anything enough to hold it. That's a dangerous place for a financial system to be, because money needs a center, and right now, there isn't one. Back here it's morning again, but it doesn't feel like a new day. It feels like a continuation. The lines outside banks started forming before sunrise. Longer than yesterday, quieter somehow, less confusion, more intent. People know what they're doing now. They're not asking questions anymore. They're acting. I passed 3 different ATMs on the way back into the station. All of them out of cash. Not temporarily unavailable. Not offline. Empty. There's a difference. One of them had a small piece of paper taped to the screen. Cash depleted. No logo. No explanation. Just that. And people were still standing in front of it, checking their cards, hoping maybe it was wrong. Hope lingers longer than logic. But not forever. Inside the financial system, the strain has crossed into something else now. Emergency liquidity measures were expanded overnight. The Federal Reserve announced new facilities, faster access, broader collateral acceptance, more aggressive support. They're trying to inject confidence. But the market isn't reacting to the amount of money being offered. It's reacting to why it's needed. And that why is becoming impossible to ignore. Bank stocks are down again in pre-market trading. Not as sharply as yesterday, but steadily, consistently, like a slow leak that no one can patch. More institutions have introduced withdrawal limits overnight. Some stricter than others. Daily caps, weekly caps. In some cases, restrictions on transfers as well. That's new, because it means the concern isn't just physical cash leaving the system. It's digital money moving too fast. And when both forms start to get restricted, people start to feel trapped. I've been tracking reports from grocery stores again. They're worse today. Much worse. Entire sections cleared out overnight. Not just food. Medicine. Baby supplies. Anything essential. Anything that can't be easily replaced. Supply trucks are arriving, but not fast enough. And when they do arrive, the inventory doesn't last long. People aren't buying for the day anymore. They're buying for uncertainty. But read an internal memo from a large retail chain that was shared with me this morning. It instructed managers to begin controlled distribution protocols. That's a formal way of saying rationing. They're preparing for sustained shortages. Gas stations have started running out. Not everywhere, but enough to notice. Lines forming now. Cars waiting, engines off, inching forward slowly. Some stations have closed temporarily, not because they want to, but because they have nothing left to sell. Fuel deliveries are becoming inconsistent, and that affects everything. Transportation, supply chains, emergency services. When fuel becomes uncertain, movement slows. And when movement slows, everything else begins to stall. I'm seeing more reports of payment systems failing entirely in certain areas. Not intermittent anymore. Down. Stores switching to cash only. And even that is becoming a problem, because cash itself is getting harder to find. It's an odd contradiction. People want physical money because they don't trust digital systems. But the physical money isn't available in the quantities they need. So they're stuck between two systems, both under stress, and neither fully reliable. I tried using my card again this morning. Different store, different network. Declined. Not insufficient funds. Processing error. That's the message now. It's becoming common. Common enough that people aren't surprised anymore. They just reach for another form of payment. Or they leave. And when enough people leave, businesses start to feel it. I've received confirmation that some smaller businesses have already closed for the day. Not permanently, just paused. They can't process payments reliably. They can't restock inventory. They can't predict pricing. So they stop. And when enough of them stop, the local economy begins to slow down. Then it begins to seize. I'm also seeing the first signs of something else. Protests, small at first, outside bank branches, outside government buildings. People demanding access to their money, demanding answers, demanding reassurance. But reassurance requires certainty. And certainty is exactly what's missing right now. Law enforcement presence is increasing in those areas. Not aggressively, just visibly. Precaution, at least for now. The messaging from officials has shifted slightly. Still calm, still controlled, but more urgent. They're asking people not to panic, to avoid unnecessary withdrawals, to trust the system. That last part is the hardest one to deliver, because trust isn't something you can request. It's something you earn. And right now, it's being tested in ways that can't be reversed quickly. We're moving into midday again, but it doesn't feel like a cycle anymore. It feels like a progression, each hour building on the last, each development narrowing the space for recovery. I've been doing this long enough to recognize phases. Early warning, shock, reaction. We're past the first two, and the reaction phase is accelerating. People are adapting faster than the system can respond. And when that happens, control starts to slip. I don't know where the breaking point is yet, but I can feel us moving toward it. Not in a sudden rush, but in a steady, unavoidable drift. And the closer we get, the quieter everything seems to become. Not because things are calming down, but because people are focusing, preparing, adjusting, waiting for whatever comes next. It's later the same day, though time has started to blur into a single continuous stretch of events. Something changed this afternoon. Not in the markets, they've already been unstable. Not in the banks, they've already been strained. What changed was behavior. Up until now, people were reacting to signals. Today, they started acting ahead of them. I'm seeing it everywhere. Stores that were still accepting cards this morning have switched entirely to cash only by early afternoon. Handwritten signs taped to doors. No corporate branding. No official notice. Just immediate decisions. Because systems are no longer reliable enough to wait for instructions. And cash, even with its limits, still works when everything else doesn't. But even that is becoming complicated. Reports are coming in now that some businesses are refusing large bills. Not out of policy, out of fear. They don't have enough change. They don't know if they'll be able to deposit it later, so they limit what they can accept. That's how fragmentation begins. Not through a single failure, but through thousands of small adjustments. I stepped outside again about an hour ago. The streets feel different now. Less movement, more clustering. People gathering in small groups, talking in low voices, comparing experiences, sharing what they've seen, where cards worked, where they didn't, which ATMs still had cash, which stores still had supplies. Information is moving faster person to person than through any official channel, and it's shaping decisions in real time. I passed by the same grocery store from yesterday. They had security at the entrance now. Not aggressive, just present, limiting how many people could enter at once. Inside, from what I could see through the window, there's almost nothing left on the shelves. What remains isn't being bought because it's useful. It's being bought because it's there. That's another shift. Choice disappears first, then necessity follows. Fuel has become a critical issue now. More stations are empty. Those that still have supply are raising prices constantly. I heard one report of prices doubling within a single day. Not officially regulated anymore. Just reacting to scarcity. Lines are longer. Tensions are rising. Still controlled. Still contained. But thinner now. More fragile. I'm also seeing something new in the financial data. Velocity. Not of money moving normally, but of money trying to leave the system. Transfers spiking. Account closures increasing. Even large institutions are beginning to reposition aggressively. Not for profit, for preservation. And when large players move like that, it sends a signal to everyone else. I received another message from inside a major bank. Short, direct, contingency plans activated. Preparing for branch closures if conditions worsen. That's the first time I've seen it stated that clearly. Branch closures. Not reduced hours. Not limited services. Closed. If that happens at scale, access to money becomes even more restricted. And once access is restricted, confidence collapses faster. I've also been monitoring digital infrastructure. Payment networks are deteriorating further. Entire regions now reporting consistent outages. Not minutes, hours. Online banking apps failing to load. Transaction histories unavailable. Balances not updating. That creates a different kind of fear. Because when people can't even see their money, they start to question whether it's still there, even if it is. And that question is enough. I've had multiple listeners report something I didn't expect to see this early. Employers delaying payroll. Not because they don't want to pay, but because they can't guarantee the transfers will go through. That's significant, because income is what sustains daily life. And if income becomes uncertain, everything else follows. I'm watching social footage coming in from several cities now. Crowds forming outside bank headquarters. Not violent, but louder, demanding access, demanding clarity. Some branches have shut their doors entirely. Lights still on inside. Employees still visible. But doors locked. That image is powerful because it represents a barrier. Not just physical, but psychological. For decades, banks have been symbols of stability, of access, of control. And now, they're becoming symbols of limitation. I've also noticed something else. More people are carrying physical goods. Not just bags of groceries, but items that look tradable. Batteries, water containers, fuel cans, even tools. It's subtle, but it's there. A shift from consumption to preparation, from spending to holding. The markets are closed now, but after-hours activity continues to deteriorate. Futures are pointing sharply downward again. Tomorrow isn't looking better, and the global reaction is amplifying. Currencies are becoming volatile in ways that don't align with any single economic indicator. This isn't about interest rates anymore. or growth projections. This is about trust. And trust is slipping. Even communication from officials has changed again. Less reassurance, more instruction. They're beginning to advise people to remain calm and limit unnecessary financial activity. That's a different tone. It's not just calming anymore. It's managing behavior, because behavior is now the driving force behind everything. I've been thinking about something as all of this unfolds. For years, we built systems to make transactions invisible, instant, seamless, effortless. And now, the absence of friction is becoming the problem. Because when something breaks, it breaks everywhere at once. There's no buffer, no delay, no containment, just immediate impact. Night is setting in again. But unlike last night, there's no sense of waiting, no sense that tomorrow might reset things. That illusion is gone. People aren't waiting anymore. They're adjusting, individually, quietly, rapidly, and the system is struggling to keep up. I can feel it now. We're getting closer to a point where control shifts completely, from institutions to individuals. And when that happens, the structure we've relied on for so long doesn't just weaken, it changes entirely. It's the third morning since the first signs became impossible to ignore. And today, something finally gave way. Banks didn't open. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to change everything. I started getting reports just before sunrise. Messages from across multiple cities. People arriving early, like they had been for the past 2 days. Expecting lines, expecting delays, but instead they found locked doors. No staff, no signage explaining it. Just dark interiors and reflections of people staring back at themselves through the glass. At first, some thought it was temporary, a delayed opening. But as the hours passed, and more locations stayed closed, the realization spread. This wasn't a delay. This was containment. I've since confirmed through internal sources that several major banking institutions have initiated temporary suspension of branch operations in high withdrawal areas. That's the official language. In reality, they're stopping the outflow because they can't sustain it anymore. ATMs are almost entirely depleted now, not just in clusters, widespread. Machines that still function are empty within minutes of being refilled, if they're refilled at all. Armored trucks are running behind schedule. Some routes have been canceled entirely. Cash isn't moving the way it used to, and without that movement, availability collapses. I walked past a bank earlier today. The line was still there, even though the doors were closed. People standing in front of a system that wasn't responding anymore. Not shouting, not breaking anything, just waiting. Because waiting feels safer than accepting what's happening. But acceptance is starting to settle in. I can see it now, in how people move, in how they speak. There's less urgency, more calculation, less panic, more adaptation. Because when something stops working completely, you stop trying to fix it, and you start finding alternatives. Digital systems have deteriorated further overnight. Major outages across multiple payment networks. Not intermittent anymore, persistent. Entire regions unable to process transactions. Retailers reverting to manual methods where they can. But even that has limits. Without verification, without confirmation, every transaction becomes a risk. And risk slows everything down. I've had reports from several businesses that have simply stopped accepting any form of currency altogether. Not just digital, cash included. They're holding inventory, waiting, because they don't know what the value of that money will be tomorrow. That's a critical shift. When businesses stop trusting money, money stops functioning. Fuel shortages have escalated sharply. Delivery networks are breaking down. Trucks aren't moving as consistently. Drivers are hesitant. Companies are uncertain about payment processing. Supply chains depend on timing, coordination, and trust. Right now, all three are failing. Gas stations that still have supply are overwhelmed. Lines stretching for blocks. people waiting hours. Some stations implementing limits per vehicle. Others shutting down after running dry within minutes of opening. I've seen footage of people filling containers, anything they can find, because fuel isn't just about driving anymore. It's about security, mobility, options. And options are becoming limited. The government made another announcement this morning. More direct this time. They've declared a financial emergency. Temporary restrictions on large withdrawals. Enhanced monitoring of transactions. Assurances that the system will be stabilized. But the response is muted, because by the time emergency measures are announced, people have already moved past waiting for them. They've seen enough. They've experienced enough. And experience overrides instruction. I'm watching reports of protests expanding, not just outside banks now, but in city centers, at distribution hubs, near fuel depots, still mostly controlled, but growing, because frustration is building. Not explosive, not chaotic, just steady. And steady pressure can break things just as effectively as sudden force. Food supply is becoming a serious concern. Not because there isn't food, but because it's not reaching shelves fast enough. Distribution centers are operating below capacity. Transportation delays are increasing. And without consistent restocking, stores are staying empty. People are beginning to adjust their expectations. Not looking for variety anymore, just availability. Whatever they can find, whatever they can use. I've also started to notice something else. Small, localized exchanges. Not formal, not organized, but happening. People trading goods directly. Water for batteries, fuel for food. Simple exchanges, based on immediate need. No currency involved. That's how it begins. Not as a system, but as a solution. And solutions tend to spread. The markets haven't opened yet, but futures are indicating another severe drop. At this point, the numbers feel secondary, because the real economy, the one people interact with every day, is already changing. And it's changing faster than any market can reflect. I tried accessing my own bank account again this morning. The app wouldn't load. The website timed out. No error message. No explanation. Just nothing. That absence is heavier than any warning, because it leaves room for imagination. And imagination fills gaps with fear. We're moving into midday again, but this time it feels different. Not like a continuation, but like a transition. From instability to something else. Something less defined, less structured, but more real. Because the systems that defined normal life are no longer functioning the way they used to, and people are beginning to live without them. It's difficult to measure time now, not because clocks have stopped, but because the structure that gave time meaning has started to dissolve. There's no normal schedule anymore, no clear beginning or end to the day, just a continuous sequence of adjustments. This morning, if it still counts as morning, brought something I've been expecting, but hoping would take longer. Major banks have officially suspended all in-person operations nationwide. Not just select branches, all of them. The announcement came through just a few hours ago, framed as a temporary stabilization measure. That phrase again, temporary, but the reality behind it is clear. They can't handle the demand, not physically, not digitally, so they've closed the doors entirely. No withdrawals, no deposits, no access, only limited online services, where those services still function, which increasingly they don't. This changes everything, because up until now there was still the idea, however fragile, that money could be accessed if needed. That illusion is gone. Now what you have is what you have, and what you can get depends on what you can offer. ATMs are effectively out of the equation, empty, offline, or disabled entirely. Cash has become static, locked in places people can't reach, or held by those who manage to withdraw it early. And that creates a divide, not based on wealth as it used to be measured, but on access. Who has something tangible, and who doesn't? Digital systems are deteriorating further. Some networks have gone completely dark. Others function sporadically, minutes of uptime followed by hours of failure. People aren't even trying consistently anymore. They test once, maybe twice, and then they move on, because repeated failure teaches faster than any explanation. I've been watching local businesses closely. Most are closed now. Not permanently, but indefinitely. A sign on a door doesn't need to say closed forever to mean it. Closed until further notice has become the standard, which in times like this means uncertainty. A few places remain open. Small operations, independent stores. They're adapting, accepting only what they can use directly. Food in exchange for other goods. Supplies in exchange for labor. No fixed prices, just negotiation. That's new, and it's spreading. Fuel has become one of the most valuable commodities in circulation. Not currency, commodity, something with immediate, undeniable use. Stations that still have supply aren't advertising it anymore. They're limiting visibility, controlling distribution, sometimes only serving known customers, sometimes trading instead of selling. I saw one station earlier today where people weren't paying with money at all. They were offering items, tools, food, even services, in exchange for a few gallons. That's where we are now. Not in theory, in practice. Transportation is slowing dramatically. Fewer vehicles on the road. Not because people don't want to move, but because they're choosing not to. Every trip is a decision now. Every mile has a cost. Supply chains are breaking down in visible ways. Warehouses are holding inventory they can't move efficiently. Retail locations are empty, and the connection between them is failing. That gap is where scarcity grows. Not from lack of resources, but from lack of movement. I've received multiple reports of distribution centers being overwhelmed, not by demand, but by uncertainty. They don't know where to send goods. They don't know who can pay. They don't know if delivery routes will even function by the time shipments arrive. So they wait, and waiting creates delays. Delays create shortages, and shortages change behavior even further. Civil unrest has expanded. Still not widespread chaos, but more frequent, more visible. Small confrontations turning into larger gatherings. Not organized movements, just collective frustration. People demanding answers from systems that no longer respond. Law enforcement is present, but stretched. Not absent, just thin, focused on key areas. Unable to be everywhere at once, which leaves gaps. And in those gaps, tension grows. I've been hearing something else more often now. Silence. Not literal silence, but the absence of certain sounds. Less traffic. Fewer transactions. No constant stream of digital confirmations. The background noise of a functioning economy is fading, and what replaces it is something quieter, more deliberate, more uncertain. I tried speaking to someone earlier, just a brief exchange outside the station. Not an interview, just a moment. We didn't talk about the markets, or the banks, or the news. We talked about what we had, what we might need. That's the shift. Conversations are no longer about value in abstract terms. They're about survival in practical ones. What do you have? What can you offer? What do you need? That's the new framework. The government continues to release statements, promises of restoration, plans for stabilization, talk of reopening systems once conditions improve. But those words feel distant now, because people aren't living in those plans. They're living in what's in front of them. And what's in front of them is a system that no longer functions the way it used to. Markets are almost irrelevant at this point. They still open. They still trade. But the connection between those numbers and everyday life is breaking, because you can't spend a stock index. You can't eat a currency exchange rate. And when money itself becomes uncertain, those metrics lose meaning. I'm starting to see communities form in small ways. Not official, not structured, but real. Neighbors sharing resources, coordinating, pooling what they have. Not out of charity, but out of necessity, because isolation doesn't work anymore. Not in a system like this. We're moving further away from what we were, and closer to something else. Something less efficient, less predictable, but more direct, more immediate, less reliant on systems that can fail all at once. I don't know what this becomes yet, but I can feel it taking shape, piece by piece, decision by decision, trade by trade, and with every hour that passes, the old system feels less like something that's broken and more like something that's already gone. I don't think anyone is waiting for the system to come back anymore. That expectation has faded. What's replaced it is something quieter, but more definitive. Acceptance. Not all at once, not spoken out loud, but visible in the way people have stopped checking their phones for updates that never come. Visible in the way bank buildings are no longer surrounded by crowds. They're just there now, closed, irrelevant, like monuments to something that used to function. I walked past one earlier today. No line, no security, no activity at all. Just a locked structure with a logo that doesn't mean what it used to. That shift happened faster than I expected. The attention has moved elsewhere, to places where things still work, or at least partially work. Small stores, local supply points, neighborhood exchanges. That's where the activity is now. That's where people go. Because those are the places where something can still be obtained, even if it's not guaranteed, even if it requires negotiation, even if it's not paid for in money. I've been observing one of these informal exchange points forming near a residential block not far from the station. It started as just a few people. Now it's dozens. Not organized. No signage. No rules written down. But there's structure to it. People bring what they have. Lay it out. Wait. Others approach. Offers are made. Counteroffers. Trades. No one is shouting. No one is rushing. Because there's an understanding now. Speed doesn't help. Availability does. I watched someone trade a container of fuel for a box of canned food and a set of batteries. No currency involved. No pricing system. Just perceived value. That's how markets begin at the most basic level. Not through policy, but through need. Fuel has become even more scarce. Not just limited. Unpredictable. Some areas have supply for a few hours. Others have none for days. There's no consistency anymore. And without consistency, planning becomes impossible. Transportation is nearly halted in some regions. Public systems are running reduced routes. Private vehicles are used only when necessary. Movement has become selective, intentional, and when movement slows, information slows too. I've noticed that updates from outside the immediate area are becoming less frequent. Not because nothing is happening, but because the channels that carried that information are failing. Digital networks are still unstable. Some are partially operational but overloaded. Others have gone completely offline. Communication is becoming localized. Word of mouth, short-range signals, physical presence. That's how information travels now. And it changes how people perceive the world. Because without constant updates, the focus narrows. From global to local, from abstract to immediate. I've been tracking supply chain developments as best I can. The breakdown is more severe than initial reports suggested. Distribution centers are no longer functioning as centralized hubs. They've become isolated stockpiles, disconnected from the systems that once moved goods efficiently. Some are being accessed directly by nearby communities. Not looted, not overrun, but utilized, because waiting for structured distribution doesn't make sense anymore. And when structure disappears, people create alternatives. I've seen footage of individuals organizing small delivery groups, using whatever vehicles still have fuel, transporting goods short distances, coordinating locally, not for profit, not under any authority, just to keep things moving. That's something I didn't expect to see this quickly. Adaptation at that scale usually takes time, but necessity accelerates everything. Food is still available in some areas, but variety is gone. Fresh items are rare. Perishables are disappearing first. What remains is what lasts, what stores, what can be traded. People are adjusting their expectations. Meals are simpler, portions smaller, waste almost non-existent. Every item has value now, even things that would have been ignored just days ago. I've noticed something else in these exchanges. Trust is being rebuilt, but not in institutions, in individuals. Reputation matters now. Consistency matters. If someone trades fairly once, people remember. If they don't, that's remembered too. It's a different kind of economy, one based not on systems, but on behavior. And behavior is harder to scale, but more stable in small groups. The government continues to broadcast updates, but fewer people are listening, not out of defiance, out of irrelevance, because the gap between what's being said and what's being experienced has grown too wide. There was another announcement this morning. Plans for a new stabilization mechanism, temporary currency controls, discussions of digital restructuring. But those are long-term ideas, and people are dealing with short-term realities. Food, fuel, access, safety. Those priorities don't wait for policy. They're immediate, and they're shaping everything. I've been thinking about the concept of value, what it meant a week ago, what it means now. A number in an account used to represent security. Now it's uncertain, but a full tank of fuel, a supply of clean water, a few days of food. Those are tangible, reliable, immediate. Value has shifted from abstract to physical. And once that shift happens, it's hard to reverse. Night is approaching again, but the pace hasn't slowed. It's just changed. Less frantic, more deliberate. People moving with purpose, not reacting anymore, acting. Because the uncertainty that once caused hesitation has turned into clarity. Not clarity about what will happen next, but clarity about what matters now. And that clarity is reshaping everything, piece by piece, quietly, permanently. It's been several days since the last time anything felt like it followed a recognizable pattern. The idea of waiting for recovery has disappeared completely now. No one is asking when banks will reopen. No one is expecting payment systems to stabilize overnight. That phase is over. What's happening now is something deeper, a reorganization, not directed, not announced, but happening anyway. I've been moving around more carefully over the past day, observing how different areas are adapting. The differences are becoming more visible. Some neighborhoods have stabilized faster than others, not because they have more resources, but because they've started coordinating, pooling supplies, assigning roles, tracking who has what, who needs what. It's not formal leadership. It's not structured authority. It's just cooperation emerging under pressure. I saw one block where residents have effectively created a shared system. Food is collected in a central location. Fuel is tracked. Basic needs are discussed openly. Not every decision is smooth. Not every exchange is equal. But it works. Because it's immediate. Because it's visible. Because people can see the outcome of their actions. That's something the old system lost over time. Distance. Abstraction. Now everything is close again. Direct. And that changes behavior. Barter has become the dominant form of exchange in most places I've observed. Not out of ideology, out of necessity. Currency isn't trusted. Digital balances can't be accessed. Cash is limited and unpredictable. So people rely on what they can offer. Goods, skills, time. I watched someone repair a generator in exchange for a supply of food. Another person organizing distribution of water in return for fuel access. These aren't isolated cases anymore. They're becoming standard practice. And the more they happen, the more they reinforce themselves, because they work, not perfectly, but reliably enough. That's all people need right now. Reliability. I've also been tracking the broader picture as best I can. Global communication is fragmented, but enough information is getting through to confirm something significant. This isn't contained. Multiple countries are experiencing similar breakdowns, different timelines, different intensities, but the same pattern: currency instability, banking restrictions, supply chain disruption, local adaptation. The scale is difficult to fully grasp, because without consistent data, it's hard to measure, but the pattern is clear. This wasn't just a national fracture. It was systemic, and systems like this don't collapse in isolation. They cascade. I've been thinking about what triggered all of this. The initial event, the moment where confidence first cracked. At the time, it seemed like a market reaction, a financial adjustment. But looking at it now, it was something else. A signal. One that spread faster than the system could absorb. Because the system itself was already stretched, already dependent on trust at a level it couldn't sustain under pressure. Once that trust started to slip, everything built on top of it followed. Not instantly, but inevitably. I've noticed that discussions about money itself have changed. People don't talk about it the same way anymore. It's no longer a central topic, because it no longer serves a central function. Instead, conversations revolve around access, availability, use, what can be done now, what can be secured, what can be exchanged. The concept of savings has been replaced by the concept of holding. Not holding value, holding goods, holding capability. That's the shift. And it's fundamental. I've also seen attempts to reintroduce structure. Small groups experimenting with agreed values, tokens, markers, even handwritten notes representing exchange agreements. Not official, not standardized, but attempts, because people naturally look for systems. Even after systems fail, they rebuild them, smaller at first, simpler, closer to the ground. I don't know which of these attempts will last. Most probably won't, but some will, because they meet a need, and needs drive permanence. Security has become more localized as well. Communities watching over themselves, not in a defensive way, but in a practical one. Ensuring resources aren't lost, ensuring fairness in exchange, maintaining some level of order, because without order, even the simplest systems break down. I've noticed less unrest today, not because conditions have improved, but because focus has shifted from reacting to maintaining. That's an important transition, because it means people are no longer looking outward for solutions. They're creating them internally, and that changes the direction of everything. The government continues to communicate, but the influence is limited. Plans for new financial frameworks are being discussed. Revised currency models, digital restructuring, emergency distribution systems, but those are still distant, and distance reduces impact, because people are living in the present, and the present doesn't wait. I've been reflecting on the pace of all this, how quickly it moved, from subtle signals to complete transformation, and the truth is, it didn't feel fast while it was happening. Each step made sense at the time. Each reaction felt reasonable, until the accumulation of those steps led here. That's how these things unfold. Not through a single moment of collapse, but through a series of shifts, each one small enough to accept, until the system itself is no longer recognizable. Night is settling in again, and the environment feels different now. Not calm, but stable in a new way, less dependent on things that can fail suddenly, more grounded in what can be seen and controlled. It's not better, but it's a functioning in a different form, and that form is still evolving. It's been over a week since the first cracks appeared. I measure time now by change, not by days, and the change has settled into something that no longer feels temporary. This is no longer a disruption. It's a new condition. The pace of collapse has slowed, not because anything has been fixed, but because there's less left to break. What remains is what couldn't fail all at once. Local systems, human coordination, practical exchange. I've spent most of today observing how these systems are stabilizing. Because they are stabilizing. Not perfectly, not evenly, but noticeably. Communities that struggled at first are finding structure. Not imposed, discovered. Small groups forming consistent exchange points. Regular times. Recognizable participants. There's a rhythm to it now. People arrive with what they have. They know roughly what it's worth, not in currency, but in relation. Fuel equals food. Water equals time. Skill equals access. It's not precise, but it's understood. And understanding is enough to sustain it. I saw something today that stood out. A group had created a simple record system. Not digital. Paper. A shared ledger. Tracking exchanges. Not to enforce value, but to maintain memory. Who contributed? Who received? Who could be relied on? It wasn't about control. It was about continuity. Because in a system without central authority, memory becomes infrastructure. I've also noticed that certain items have begun to act as informal standards. Not currency in the traditional sense, but reference points. Fuel is one. Clean water is another. Batteries, medical supplies, these aren't just useful, they're consistent. And consistency is what allows comparison. Comparison allows exchange. And exchange allows systems to grow. Transportation is still limited, but it's adapting. Short-distance routes are functioning again. Not formally, but predictably. People moving goods between nearby areas. On schedules they've created themselves. Not optimized, but reliable. And reliability is more valuable than efficiency right now. Larger supply chains are still fractured, but fragments of them are reconnecting at a smaller scale, piece by piece, without centralized coordination, just local decisions aligning over time. I've been receiving more information from outside the immediate region again. Communication is improving in pockets, not globally, but enough to see patterns. Other countries are following similar paths, different resources, different challenges, but the same outcome. Central systems fail. Local systems emerge, stabilize, then begin to connect. Not through policy, through necessity. That's how networks rebuild. Not from the top down, but from the ground up. There's been another announcement today from federal authorities. More structured this time. Plans for a new financial framework. A reissued digital currency. Backed differently. Controlled differently. They're calling it a reset. A restart. But the response I'm seeing is cautious. Not rejection. But not acceptance either. Because trust doesn't return just because something new is introduced. Trust requires time. Consistency. Proof. And right now, people are relying on what already works in front of them, not what's being promised. I've noticed fewer protests now, not because people are satisfied, but because energy has shifted from demanding solutions to building them. That's a quieter process, less visible, but more powerful, because it creates something real, instead of waiting for something distant. I've also been thinking about how quickly value systems changed. What mattered before, what matters now. The transition wasn't debated. It wasn't voted on. It just happened, because reality forced it. And once people adjusted, there was no reason to go back. Not yet. Maybe not ever in the same way. I've spoken just briefly in passing with a few people over the past day. Not interviews, just moments. And there's a common thread in all of them. Clarity. Not about the future, but about the present. They know what they need. They know what they can offer. They know who they can rely on. That clarity didn't exist before. It was replaced by systems that handled everything. until those systems failed. Now, responsibility is closer, heavier, but clearer. I've noticed something else too. Waste has disappeared. Completely. Every item is used, reused, repaired. Nothing is taken for granted, because everything has immediate value. That shift alone changes how people interact with the world, with each other. It creates a different kind of awareness, one that wasn't necessary before, but is essential now. Night has come again, and for the first time since this began, it doesn't feel like a pause in chaos. It feels like part of a cycle. Day and night both holding the same structure, the same rhythm. There's still uncertainty, still limitations, still gaps, but there's also continuity. And continuity is the first sign of something sustainable. The old system isn't coming back the way it was. That much is clear now. Too much has changed. Too much trust has been lost. But something else is forming. Not as powerful, not as fast, but more grounded, more visible, built on what people can actually see and verify. And that kind of system doesn't collapse the same way. It doesn't depend on belief alone. It depends on participation. And right now, participation is all that's holding things together. Whatever comes next will be built on that. I've stopped trying to mark the exact day. It doesn't matter the way it used to. What matters now is that something has settled. Not resolved, not repaired, but settled into a form that people can live inside. I'm still here in the station. The equipment is running barely, but enough to keep this signal alive. I don't know how far it reaches anymore, but I know someone is listening, and that's enough. The world outside isn't the one I used to describe. The numbers I used to track don't define anything anymore. Markets still exist somewhere, I'm sure. Currencies still have values assigned to them. But those values don't shape daily life the way they once did. What shapes life now is proximity, access, trust at the smallest level. I've been walking through the same streets over the past few days, and I've watched them change, not fall apart, reform. The empty stores are no longer just empty. Some have been repurposed, used as shared storage, distribution points, places where people bring what they have and take what they need within reason. Not perfect, not always fair, but functional. And function is what matters. The exchange points have become more consistent, less chaotic, more predictable. People recognize each other now. They know who trades honestly, who contributes, who takes more than they give. Reputation has become currency, not written down, but understood and enforced quietly. There's a kind of order in that, not imposed, earned. Fuel is still scarce, but it's being managed more carefully. Used only when necessary, shared when possible. Transportation has become purposeful. No unnecessary movement. Every trip has meaning. Every decision has weight. Food is still limited, but it's distributed more evenly now. Communities have figured out how to stretch what they have, how to rotate supplies, how to avoid waste. It's not abundance, but it's stability, and stability feels like something rare now. I've been hearing more about attempts to reconnect larger systems, regional coordination, small networks linking together, sharing resources between areas, slowly, carefully, testing what works. There's even talk of standardized exchange markers forming between communities, not imposed from above, agreed upon locally, based on what people already trust. That's important, because trust is where everything begins, and everything ends. I think about that a lot now, how this all started. Not with a disaster you could see, not with something physical breaking, but with something less visible. Trust. It didn't disappear all at once. It eroded, quietly, gradually, until one moment, it couldn't hold anymore. And once that happened, everything built on top of it followed. The banks didn't fail first. The markets didn't fail first. Trust did. And the rest was just consequence. I've spent years explaining financial systems, breaking down complex structures into something people could understand. But in the end, it comes down to something simple. If people believe something has value, it works. If they stop believing, it doesn't. That's the entire system. And we built something enormous on top of that idea. Something powerful, efficient, global, but also fragile. Because belief can change. And when it does, scale becomes a weakness, not a strength. What's forming now is smaller, slower, less efficient, but stronger in a different way. Because it's based on what people can see, what they can verify, what they can hold. It doesn't require blind trust. It requires participation. And participation is harder to break. I don't know what the future looks like from here. There will be attempts to rebuild the old systems. There always are. Some of them might succeed in parts, but they won't be the same. They can't be. Too many people have seen what happens when trust disappears. That knowledge doesn't go away. It changes behavior permanently. I've noticed something in myself too. The way I think about value, about security, is different now. Numbers don't carry the same weight. Access does. Relationships do. Capability does. That shift is irreversible. The signal is getting weaker. I can hear it in the equipment, feel it in the interruptions. This might be the last time I can broadcast like this. And if it is, then I want to leave this as clearly as I can. We didn't lose everything. It might feel like that. It might look like that. But we didn't. We lost a system. A very large, very complex system. One that we relied on so completely, we forgot what it was built on. But underneath it, people are still here, adapting, building, trading, organizing, finding ways to continue. Not the same way, but a way that works. And maybe that's what matters most. Not how it collapsed, but what remains after. Because what remains is what everything else will be built on. If you're hearing this, then you're still part of that. Still part of whatever comes next. And whatever that is, it won't be based on numbers alone. It will be based on something far more fragile and far more powerful. Trust. And this time, I think people will understand exactly what that means.